Appreciate you. Well, that was a very warm welcome, and I appreciate it. And this is awkward getting up here. Sorry, excuse me. So someone said War Eagle. Who was the person that said War Eagle? Okay, yay. If Pastor JJ was here, I don't think that would have been acceptable. So he would not have been happy with that. So anyway, you'll have to tell him about it later. Him and I used to joke a lot about between Auburn and Alabama, that was just a great rivalry. It still is today. Tonight, I'm going to, like Pastor David said, talk to you a little bit about the 5 essentials. And the topic is raising kids through the lens of trust. And, my husband and I, we have 5 kids. We have pretty much, our oldest is 24, and she is on her own, but she's the only one. Everybody else, we have a bit of parenting that we're still doing with them because they're in college and we are paying for their college. And so we get to weigh in on a little bit. And then the youngest is still at home. And so I'm just going to kind of take you through all the 5 essentials of parenting. And so Henry Cloud, when he wrote this book, Henry, I don't know if you guys know Boundaries. He's wrote other books with his colleague Townsend. But as I was listening to this, I thought, man, this is such an awesome opportunity to really focus on kind of narrow down and pinpoint what trust is. And in parenting, like Pastor David said, it's very fragile, right? We can always get lost in moments. And so just tonight, I want to go ahead and we'll go ahead and start and talk about the first one. The first essential in trust is do your kids feel like you get them. And I feel like this is probably the most important one. My children, I grew up with my grandmother as a primary figure in my life. I had great parents, but my grandmother was someone who was constantly pouring into me. My grandmother always told me from the moment I had my kids, like the most important thing is to enjoy them. And so you think, well, yeah, I've got a baby. I am talking to my baby every day. My baby's smiling at me. I got this thing down, right? And so then you move through each stage of parenting, and the understanding gets a little bit more difficult, right? We have so many things coming out at us in our world between technology, friendships, just the stressors of life. And but if we look at our children through the lens of understanding, then we gain their hearts. And so there were so many things just from my kids being preschoolers all the way through teenagers, and each kid was so different. My father was an only child, and so he used to say to me, "How can all your kids be so different when they're being brought up in the same household?" But we all know that, at every stage of parenting, you've never parented that child at that age. And so you're experiencing that child at that stage differently for each child. And they're experiencing you as a parent. And so getting to know your children and understanding them at every age can look really different. I mean, from the baby stage, it's really just about taking care of them. When they become preschoolers, you start to see more of their sin nature come out. And we all have seen, no one really needs to explain to a parent that children have sin natures, right? From the moment we tell them no or have to discipline them, right, because they're getting into something, we see that sin nature come out. So my oldest son was, I felt like Pastor David described a little bit about what I did before, but I took a lot of classes, many classes, on discipline, okay? So like how to shape the behavior of a child. And so I really thought this parenting thing is going to be so easy, right? I've got this under control because I watched everybody. One of my jobs that I did was to observe children and then come up with some kind of plan to help them succeed in class. And so I would go in classes, write up a plan, submit it, and then test to see if it actually worked. And we got it right a lot of times. And if we didn't, we would just go back to the drawing board. And I thought, okay, I know how to do this. But the problem with that is, the Lord has set parenting up so that we need him, right? We can't do this alone, and we need the Lord to draw from, and that's why he's set up so that every kid's different, every stage is different, and so my oldest son, I remember him getting really frustrated every time I talked to him and had to tell him no. I mean, it would be like him touching the outlet or something, and he would just cry, and I could just tell he would be mad for a long time. I mean, he's like a 2-year-old, and we were having some difficulty, him and I. And I remember praying and saying, Lord, I don't know how to discipline this child to where he's really gonna be able to live through the 2-year-old stage. Like, we're not gonna make it. And I mean, it was 2. So I'm thinking, like, I was working with teenagers who carried shanks in their socks. So I'm thinking this 2-year-old situation is a piece of cake, but I couldn't get through to this kid. And I remember just feeling like, Lord, he just continually showed me and corrected me as a parent in how to discipline and love this child. And one of the things that I noticed right away was his sensitivity to words, and so his love language was words. I didn't really understand any of that then. He was only 2, but I started changing the way that I spoke to him. And so I would encourage him and discipline him and talk to him, and my husband too, and we just started seeing a change to where he would listen more. And so that was just one example. I had another child who had so many behavior issues as a toddler. He was our 4th child, our 3rd son in a row, and we had 4 kids under 6. So this was kind of a wild ride that we took on to take in parenting so many kids in a row. But we were disciplining him so much that I was like, man, I think we're encouraging him to disobey because he's just getting really good at it, and I'm getting really frustrated. And so as I was disciplining him one night, I just remembered this really strong sense of the Lord saying, have you smiled at him today? You're spending a lot of time disciplining and correcting his behavior, but I don't think you need to be smiling at him. And so he was probably 4 years old. I just started smiling at him as much as possible. And throughout the day when he wasn't in trouble, smiling at him. And it actually was a practice. It wasn't something that just came so natural because he was so difficult. So difficult, in fact, that my daughter, who was a firstborn, very obedient, would pray for him. And she would say things like, Dear Jesus, please keep Will from going to prison. And, and seriously, and she remembers that now. She's like, Mom, that was crazy. But over and over again, and spending time with Will and smiling at him and letting him know that I really cared about him and loved him and started understanding who he was. Actually, one of the things that the Lord did was we were in a really frustrating stage of parenting, and one night I was up late and I ended up watching The Dog Whisperer. Have you guys ever seen The Dog Whisperer show? I don't even know. Is that on? I don't know. TV's not the same now. You can just watch one thing over and over or just a whole series at a time. But anyway, back then I was watching The Dog Whisperer, and it was talking about really physical dogs and how they needed to be, when they were hard to train. What you had to do was you had to work them. So they really had to be physical, and you had to make sure that they were getting out all of their energy. Well, as I'm watching that, I'm like, you know what? This kind of reminds me of Will. Kind of reminds me of my kid. And so the next day, I was like, you know what? I told my husband, I'm like, I think we need a trampoline or something. We need something to get this energy out of this kid. And I just started changing my parenting. What was really funny is my dad, he lives in Alabama, but he called me and he's like, this is going to sound really weird, but I've been praying for Will, and I watched the dog whisperer last night. And then I was like, okay, Lord, I know it was you, Lord, because that's just too weird. And so we got him on a exercise program, and one thing that I came to understand about him later and really know about him is he's an athlete. Like, he really needs to work out every day, and God has used that. And so I think as parents, we're always thinking, if I can just shape this child to obey, then I would get the outcome that I want. But in actuality, I think the Lord uses our prayers and our dependence on Him to shape the child, and it kind of works hand in hand. And so that's something that the Lord did in his life. And he is an athlete. He's going to college and play basketball. So, God did that in his life. And I think if I was not understanding of Will and really sought the Lord, because the Lord He knows our kids more than we could ever know them. We know them for what we see. We know them for what we experience, but we don't really know our children like Jesus knows our children, and we can trust Him. And so those are just two examples. There's so many more that the Lord showed me. So in the first couple blanks, it just says that trust in parenting is not automatic, but it is built through trust, what a great sentence. That's trust and trust. Or it's built in understanding. And then the second one, kids need to feel heard, not just managed. I think because I had worked with kids that had behavior issues, that I was always had them on a track. But in parenting, that's not going to work, right? Because if we discipline our kids and treat them like they are going through, if they do this, then this will happen, then you're going to miss out. I know for me, one of the most important things was to have mentors in my life who really poured into me and wanted to show me how, all of these things that I've experienced now, but to give me examples and to help me. And one of those was my grandmother, like I said, but I had many people in the church that I could reach out to and say, you know what, we're really struggling in these areas. And one of the things that always came up, especially with raising kids to understanding, is James 1:19 says, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And I think as we are getting to know our kids at every different stage, it's not like you get to know them at 2 and you know them for their entire life. Although I do think that looking back, that most of my kids, their personalities as preschoolers are pretty much dead on still to who they are today. That might be scary to some of you. You might be thinking, I don't know how this is going to work out, but it will be awesome to look back, and I know the Lord will help each one of you as you go through, just like He did me. So the next essential is motive. This is a tricky one. The question I have on here is, why am I doing this as far as like discipline? Is it for their good or my comfort? And those things kind of run parallel because, sometimes it is for our comfort, and that's okay too. If kids are being loud and obnoxious, and, it's fine to discipline for that. What I'm really talking about here for motive is, when you're disciplining your kids, are you thinking about how their heart is going to be shaped? And so I have a mentor that used to be at our church years ago. She actually worked with Cloud and Townsend. Her name's Kim Barger, and she's a psychologist. And she always, I would have her, anytime I talked in women's ministry or anything with parenting, I would have her come in and talk to our parents. And one of the things that she said, and my kids were very little when she said this, but I really took hold to this advice. She said, when you are disciplining, you need to get out of the way as much as you possibly can. And so obviously that is in your emotions, your anger, making sure that they feel the weight of what they've done, okay? And so when they're little, that might look like, if let's just give it an example to make this really easy. Let's say that they spill something or they break something and they did it on purpose, okay? Like my boys so many times, 4 boys, 4 kids under 6, we had so many things broken. And so they knew the rules, right? You don't throw in the house or whatever. And so there would be pictures falling off the wall or whatever. But if I would have reacted in anger, what would my kids be focused on? They would be focused on my reaction to their behavior instead of what they did. So if I yelled or, reacted really harshly, then they're going to walk away feeling bad that mom was mad, or thinking about how maybe I was a little bit too intense and that wasn't fair. And I don't know if you had this feeling, but I can remember being a middle schooler and really struggling with my parents over lecturing. Okay, so I would get in trouble, and it was a grade, or I didn't study, and then we just talk for hours about like, how did I not study, and or why did I not do whatever I was supposed to do. I could tell you so many stories. I was very strong-willed, I probably still am actually, but it doesn't hurt as much anymore. But when I was in middle school, my mom made homemade bread. Okay, and which was great, right? That sounds like a good thing. And she would make these peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for me every day and put them in my lunchbox. And the bread was like this thick. It was like giant bread, and I hated it. I felt so different. Like all my friends had, I don't even know what they had, but anyway, it was not that. And so I would take my lunch, and I would be going out to the bus stop, and I would just chunk it over the fence. And, I don't know what I was thinking, that no one was ever going to find that, or it was going to disappear. I never thought about it. I just chunked it over the fence and kept on walking. And one day my neighbor called my mom back there to show her all the sandwiches that I had thrown over the back. But I remember having an extensive, I have so many things like that, but extensive memories of my parents just sitting me down for, we talked for hours about that. And I can remember being so upset that they were so mad and being like, well, it's terrible. Like I've told them, and I never really got the fact that that's ludicrous. That's absolutely ridiculous that I would take something my mother made me and cared about and spent time doing, and I just chunked it over. Like, that's so embarrassing. But as a middle schooler, I did not care. I didn't care. What I cared about was that I had to spend however long they spent lecturing me about that issue. So maybe, and I'm not being disrespectful right now. I'm not playing this for my mother, but maybe they should have had me go clean it up and, I don't know, help make bread next time. I don't know. There could have been something else, but I was the problem. And because my parents were so inserted in the discipline, I went to bed mad at them instead of mad at what I did. So this played out many times over our parenting, and my husband and I we had a bad cop, good cop kind of thing, and so one person would come in and kind of handle the situation, and then another person would come in and kind of be there, right, and sit with them about it. But when our kids were in high school, the high school age, we had one son that got in pretty significant trouble, and I remember by then we had lots of practice with this, so there's no pat on the back. We did it wrong plenty of times, but we sat with him in his, difficulties and his brokenness. And, I can just remember him weeping. And I remember thinking back about what Kim had shared years before and how to let them sit with their sin. It's really hard as a parent. You really want to fix it. You really want to lecture. Some people are like, I'm not as much of a lecturer. My husband is a lecturer. He's really good at it. And so the kids, you can kind of tell. And so we have that look that we kind of like, and so the kids aren't seeing. But with our son, he really did feel the weight. And I think, what if we would have just disciplined in a way that he was angry with us and felt like maybe we over-disciplined to the point that he couldn't feel that, What would he be struggling with now, It's not all up to us, and I know that kids, it's their responsibility to obey their parents. That's what the Lord tells them to do. But also, I think as a parent, it's really important for us to get out of the way as much as possible, because sin is serious. And if we get in the way of discipline too much, then the kids are reliant on us to be there. And like right now, I have 4 kids at college and out of state, living on their own. I have, no idea. I mean, we do have a couple on Life 360. All of them have chosen to be on Life 360. We look at it a lot less than we did when they first went away to college. We pretty much were trapped on our phone, watching where they were and wondering what they were doing. But now we really, don't even really look at it. But having those moments where we questioned our motive and were very sure in how we were helping our kids to see that he disciplines those he loves. And it's the same thing for us now. We're all on the same path. And I think the motive of parenting and leading our kids to follow the Lord, something that I talk to my young adult kids about all the time, is that your path and my path is the same. We all are following Jesus. We're all, need to be in the Word. We need to be praying. And so, I want you to ask me, like, Mom, how are you? What are you reading right now in God's Word? And what do you want me to pray about you for, right now? And I think those are things that happen over time when you have a high level of trust in your parenting with your kids. The third and fourth blank for motive are James 1:19 reminds us to be quick to listen and slow to speak. I think especially with young adults, of not giving all the answers, they honestly know how we feel about every situation now, just from all the years of parenting and being in our home. And the process of letting go, a lot of that is just asking them, like, what can we pray for you for? What do you need us to pray about in your life? And then also just being there for them if they need us. I think the hard part, I don't know, does anybody in here have young adults? So yeah, the calls that you get from young adults is really different. So over the years, with parenting, you're kind of letting loose the reins a little bit. So when they're young, you're in it. You're like, who did you sit with at lunch? Oh, they didn't let you sit with them? Okay, let's pray about that. Like, you're on it. But as they get older, like when they call home and they need you, it's things like, I got in a car wreck today, or, I had a difficulty with my boss. And so you just kind of up the ante, okay? And it gets really more intense. So when they're little and you can establish these rails of trust in their lives, it really helps later on. One of the things that my kids really called me on with motive, my kids were really little, from Alabama, so we say yes sir, yes ma'am, and it's like, you could say it 10 times in a few minutes and it's expected. Okay, this is very important. And my husband and I, we both were raised that way. And so when we had our kids, we live in Florida, and people would get irritated with us. Our kids were saying, and even my husband at work, like his boss talked to him about it because he said yes ma'am to somebody, and he's like, okay. So we were a little more relaxed, not as much at home, but like out, we just weren't. So we would go home and our parents would be so critical of like, how, are you not teaching these kids to say, or they would say, yeah, oh, that was just killer. They were absolutely dumbfounded that we could allow our kids, and like, what are going to happen to these kids? How are they going to function in society without being, and they all say, yes, sir, and yes, they do. But I can remember feeling so judged, and my temperature would just get I would just be so quick to discipline them, and it would be a little, like, it must have been so confusing to them, because when my parents are around, and we were, and like literally, we would get in the car on the way to Alabama, and my husband would be like a drill sergeant to my kids. Say yes, sir. Okay, and so it must have been so confusing to them. I'll have to bring that up and hear what they have to say about that. But by the time we got home, they were better at it, but not 100%, and my parents were on it. And so I could just feel my temperature rise, and I would just feel like, oh no, I'm going to get judged. And so the motive behind that was embarrassment. It was, what are my parents going to say? Instead of like that was really a parenting flaw. That really wasn't, it didn't have anything to do with the child, because we hadn't been doing that at home. And I should have just been honest with my parents and said, you know what, it's different. I think we did have some heart-to-heart moments. That's just a little example. Another one is as your kids get older and they get in trouble. It is really tempting to hide and guard and protect so that you don't feel the embarrassment of your kids getting in trouble. And it is embarrassing. But your kids know, and you're telling them that you care about their heart and them not, being close to the Lord. You're praying for all these things. But is it really that, your neighbor knows that they got in trouble? And so, I don't know, just kind of testing yourself and asking, what is my motive behind discipline, and what is my motive behind caring for this child? And, that's a really big deal. The other one, number 4, says our kids can sense our motives, whether we're leading from love or frustration. And, like I just said, your motive is very apparent. So the next essential is ability. So, are we willing to grow is the question there. Are you willing to grow? We all start out with babies, unless you're a foster parent. I have a great friend that started out with a 12-year-old. That is a different sort of thing. And she could teach a lot on ability, because you're starting out and the kid's already pretty well established there. But we get the opportunity to start with babies, and we just kind of grow and learn. And, I really think that having people around you that can weigh in on your parenting. We homeschooled for a while. And are there any homeschoolers in here? Yeah, and so one of the things that I was really nervous about is I felt like I was the only one disciplining my kids during the day. And so when we went out to a park, I just felt like, okay, I'm going to tell the other moms. Like, we would go with friends or go to different field trips. Like, would you mind? Like, I trust you. Would you mind going and telling them they're doing the wrong thing, or, asking them to get off whatever they were climbing, or, whatever the issue was, having other people to discipline them. And that was a stretch, but I really felt like the Lord really wanted me to grow and wanted my kids to grow, so that I wasn't the only person disciplining my husband and I. And, it was interesting. Each kid was different in the way they would respond. So, and I would only ask trusted friends. I'm not going to ask someone who's over the top to get onto my kids. That probably would have been a good experiment, but I wasn't that brave back then. So I would have good friends to get onto them. And you know what? It happens naturally anyway. When you're in church, you're going to have, different Sunday school teachers and things get onto your kids. But I feel like that is something to dig into. In learning how to parent and how to discipline, and I'm looking at this right now and thinking, did I do that? 1, 2, 3. Okay. And so Proverbs 1:5 says, let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. And so again, none of us start out knowing how to parent. And certainly, my parenting has changed over the years. I mean, my husband and I, we will say to our kids now, like, we have a small fund if you guys need counseling, and so just let us know. Because they had wonderful lives. And, like, we have pictures that, like, cycle through of, like, our Google photos or something that are attached to our TV. And, like, there's vacations and there's all these wonderful things. And you would think sometimes these kids, I mean, they are telling us, like, Mom and Dad, we didn't get to do this, or we didn't, have phones. They don't really care now. They think it's a good thing, but we didn't let anyone get a phone until they were 14. And I wish it would have been, like, 18. But since we started with the oldest one at 14, we've got the fifth one. He's got a year to wait, and we've got lots of obstacles to teach him between now and then, but or he has to go through before he gets that. But, each kid kind of had their own thing that they were dealing with and working through. And our ability as parents, I mean, we only know so much. Again, the Lord, drawing from the Lord and his wisdom is absolutely the most important thing. There are things that my husband and I prayed about when our kids were little, especially about their friendship with each other. That was really important to us. And seeing the fruit of that now, they were like hitting each other in the head with Thomas the Tank Engine. I'm talking about good blood coming down their face. And I'm like, they're 3 and 4 years old. And I'm thinking, they are never going to be friends. They are going to hate each other. And just continuing praying through some of those things was really, you only can say it's the Lord, right? Like that is not my husband and I's ability. We're trusting in the Lord. We're growing and we're asking for help, but it really is just, it's God's wisdom that helps with that. So I think this is 5 and 6. Hebrews 12:6 says, Hebrews 12:6 says, teaches us that the Lord disciplines those he loves. And then our parenting ability does not mean perfection, but it means being teachable and resourceful. Having a teachable spirit, and especially when your kids are young, I think there's such a comparison when you have preschoolers and elementary kids. You're looking at, it probably happens all the way through, but I think you just, as you get older, I don't think you can care as much because you probably would just, you've learned that it's all going to work out. And if we trust the Lord with our kids, there really is no other option, because if we have a control mindset with children, then first of all, that's not going to work, because kids are, made in the image of God, and he is refining them and teaching them so as he is teaching us. And so it's never going to be like a check the box kind of situation. And I don't know that we would want that. It's not even that way with us and the Lord. So the next one we're going to go over is character. Proverbs 27 says, the righteous who walks in integrity, blessed are his children after him. And this verse and this question is who are you when no one's watching? When my kids were really young, we were homeschoolers. We started every August in Genesis, and we would work our way through the Bible. And I remember my oldest son was in kindergarten, and we were talking about Adam and Eve. And I just said, how do you know that Adam and Eve sinned? And the answer was because God told them, what not to do, and they did it. But what he said was because they hid. And so when he said that to me, I don't know, it just really struck a chord of like, that is what sin is, is that hiding. And so I told him this recently. I'm like, man, I don't know. I've used that like in so many parenting talks and in different discussions with parents, but and with kids, to know that when you hide, it is a good indication that you might be sinning. And so when I talk to kids about sin and how to recognize sin in their life, I talk to them about, turning the channel when, their parents walk by, and maybe they don't want them to see what is on their iPad or on the TV. But it's so true for us too. Always joke about wives hiding receipts and stuff like that, and the women are like, oh, stop talking about that, but sin is sin, and it is serious. And so I think for every time that we are teaching our kids to sin, the enemy wants nothing more than to discredit us and to make sure that our children don't listen to us. So just a real, as a child, my parents were divorced when I was 6. And, I kind of knew what was going on, in my house. I can remember just really bad fights and stuff before they got divorced. And then my mom remarried very quickly after that. And I can remember being a teenager and her disciplining me for things that I did wrong. But in my mind, I was thinking, but you did this. And it really kept me from hearing from the Lord. It really helped me from being accountable for my own sin. I came to know the Lord when I was 17, but I think of all those years that the enemy used that in my life. So I would just say, be really careful about sin in your own life. Obviously, we are all sinners, and we just acknowledge we are all sinners, and acknowledge that to your kids. I don't have it all together, and I am striving daily to follow Jesus. I am a driver, to one kid now. We have no teenagers driving in our house. They're all away, and so I'm taking my kid to school every morning, and there's traffic and there's situations, and we can literally pray in the driveway, and I will be down the street and irritated and why did he just do that? And then I look over at my son and I'm like, I just prayed and asked Jesus to work through me today, and I'm already mad. And he laughs, and he's like, it's okay, Mom. And I'm like, I'm a sinner, son. I am not even hiding that, obviously not very well, because I'm just, so irritated at this moment after I just prayed and we spent time with the Lord before we even got in the car. And it's so quick, and I just, want him to know that, sin is serious, and making sure that we have short accounts with the Lord. And our character really matters. It really matters as parents. And, no matter what the struggle is, the Lord, He will help all of us get back on the right path. And as we are parenting, and we're disciplining our kids and struggling with seeing them struggle, is really important to make sure that we're following the Lord. Nobody's going to get it 100%, and, my husband and I haven't got it 100%, but we want to make sure that we tell our kids, God is perfect. So that's what we're aiming to be close to Jesus, and we want him to do a refining work in our hearts and in our lives. The last one is track record. And so that's obvious, are you consistent? So, Psalm 37:3 says, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. And I think just that long-term faithfulness in really small things is very important. Your children, just like character, consistency is the key to trust. If they know they can trust you, that when they come to you, that, they're struggling with something or they did something wrong, that you're not going to fly off the handle and attack their, because you're worried. This all kind of builds on each other. You're worried about what others might think, or that they're going to end up in jail, like my daughter worried about Will. All those things, help the children with their trust. And so, track record over time. They know they can call you. They know they can trust you with their hearts and what they're struggling with. That is really important. Over just this last week and all the things that are going on in our country, I got a couple phone calls right in a row, and my 20-year-old from UCF called, and he said, "Mom, have you seen the news?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Can you just turn your phone off for me?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "I just don't want you to see anything, Mom. I just want you to be okay." And then, hey, is Dad around? And so just called and talked to my husband about, just what he was feeling. He was just really struggling. And then my other son texted me, hey, Mom, just turn off the news. Like, make sure you're not on your phone, and make sure Seth isn't, seeing any screens either right now. And then I was able to talk to him, and, you just think about the rails and the guidelines that you're laying when your children are really young is really going to be impactful later on. They need us as trusted guides in their life. And this world is so unpredictable, and the wicked are just roaming, right? And we don't have to be afraid, because he that is in us is greater than he that is in the world. But, I think keeping the opportunities for the enemy to work in our kids' lives at a minimum. We do not want any part of that. And so I think just, I'm prepared for this, was thinking about it, and then seeing my sons kind of reach out and just check on us and make sure. And I just thought, that's kind of the purpose, right? Kind of the purpose is for relationship with the Lord, protecting others, looking out for their parents, and it's just the fruit of all these years. It's not perfection. I don't feel like I have it all together. In fact, I tell them all the time, I've never raised you at this age, and so I'm going to need some time to pray about this, But I am thankful that they do call and trust us with their hearts. Number 9, Proverbs 27 says, the righteous who walk in integrity blesses their children. And then number 10 is trust built over time through consistency is what Henry Cloud calls a track record. So trust over time.